Looking for public comment or suggestions. We have nobody with us today in the council chambers, and I don't see any call-ins. So unless somebody has something, somebody's hiding, we can go through that. Approval of minutes for February 1. Any questions, comments, or issues with that, or could I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by
Second.
Neal, second by Larson. No more questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimous, thank you. And we'll start right in with the discussion and possible action on earlier closing times for some or all of Wausau City Parks. And Ms. Polly did kind of give us a little background on that, but maybe she could start us off with a refresher on the topic.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me on this?
Yep.
Okay, well, this came as a comment, as a request at the last two meetings. I guess 2 meetings ago, it came up as a discussion, and we thought we could discuss it at the last meeting, and we found out that we could not. By the recommendation of the city attorney, I did not put any specific changes or anything into the packet so that it could be a general discussion and a direction from the committee if we were to make any changes. And then that if there are any changes, it would be incorporated with the changes that you approved last month. But currently our park hours in all of our parks are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. One of the things we did change with the last ordinance updates was that it had an exception in there if that you had a park permit, you could be in there till midnight, but to make it cleaner and more consistent, everybody who has a shelter rental has an agreement anyway, and if they need that accommodation to be in there a little bit longer, then it's granted on a case-by-case basis, and then the police department is made aware of that so they know who should be in there and who shouldn't. Same with if they needed to come in earlier, which is usually not the case, but every now and then they come in before 6. So this got brought up with a citizen that had concerns about during this winter time and people being in 3M Park sledding up until 11 p.m. And wanted that discussion. So it is back on your agenda for discussion tonight. From a staff perspective, the 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. has worked very well as far as we are aware. We haven't had any other complaints or concerns with those. Typically, you know, if our parks are dark, a lot of people aren't in them. We do have lights during the winter time at certain parks, but we have not received any other one. We have been able to work with it. It's consistent with our county parks as well. We do have signage in every park that has this, so if we did change something, it would be a pretty big undertaking as well to make all those changes within the city so that it was consistent, but it is on for discussion.
Just so before we start the discussion, just so everybody knows, it's probably out of camera range, but I should tell you that our city attorney has arrived at our meeting. If you do have any questions for her.
I have my hand up.
Very good. Alder Larson, go for it.
Yeah, I brought this up because of one of my constituents brought it up in it, and I guess I just would like to hear what some other, of my colleagues think of maybe pushing this up to maybe back to 10 o'clock. I mean, I certainly can see the point where, county parks would want to keep theirs open till 11 o'clock, but, when you're having city parks and you have them in neighborhoods and you're keeping them open till 11 o'clock at night, it's kind of like, first of all, what are we promoting, for one? And for two, when you have neighbors with children and stuff trying to sleep, and people are making noise out there at 11 o'clock, to me, it would make sense to close them earlier. But I'm open for suggestions. I'd just like to hear what my colleagues think.
Wondering, before we go on, I'd recognize anybody else too, but Ms. Polly mentioned something I hadn't thought of, and that's changing all those signs. How many signs are we talking about, and what kind of a project would that be?
Well, Greg, I see you're on, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a sign in every park, I believe, that has the park hours on it. Some parks may have multiple. Some parks have just printed signs, and some parks have actual routed signs. So, changing out, taking the kind of old-time routed signs out and putting up new signs that are printed is a little probably easier than reroutering any signs. The number I don't have exactly off the top of my head. We'd have to probably go around and do an inventory.
Oops, okay, so that'd be a serious undertaking, though.
It would be pretty large.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Alder Larson, has your constituent gotten back to you at all as to further problems or annoyances?
No, she hasn't, other than what we had discussed the other night about the signs, the signage, for walking the dogs, the loose dogs. And, but no, she hasn't said anything else about the hours, so, like I said, I just thought I'd throw it out there. I'd like to hear from some of my constituents.
Okay, I think Alder Killian had a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly sympathize with what some of Alder Larson's constituents, at least one, has experienced near the park. I'd be interested in keeping eyes and ears on situations like this, just to see if there may be additional concerns from residents about noise late in the evening. One thing I did find interesting, and I'd be certainly eager to get Ms. Polly's view or input on this. It looked when I had looked at other cities' hours, 11 p.m. seemed to be fairly standard, looking throughout the state. So I guess when I saw that, it looks that looks like a common closing hour. So, well, I think we could maybe keep our eyes and ears open to make sure that neighboring residents aren't kind of bothered by activities late at night in our parks. I had seen that 11 p.m. seems to be a fairly standard hour for park closures, looking around at municipalities throughout the state.
Yes, you are correct, Mr. Killian. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or thoughts? It sounds like Mr. Neal.
Sarah's her hand up too.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing as I don't really think that we've gotten a lot of, or even appreciable number of complaints about this in all the years I've been on this committee, I would just as soon leave well enough alone. We do have noise statutes, ordinances. If somebody is in a park and making too much noise, that could be, something that, the police department might go and have them, quiet down. But I just can't see it as being that big of a problem, particularly in winter when, everybody's windows are shut and double glazed and the doors are shut and, you're sealed off from the cold. I just don't see it as a big deal, and I wouldn't like to be, changing it and going through all the expense of new signage and whatnot. So I just leave it alone.
Very good, thank you. Alder Watson, sorry if I didn't recognize you earlier.
Yep, so I think I'm in agreement. I think that the standard hours how the parks are currently set is nice. I think it's good for a lot of people who have very work schedules. Keeping it open to 11 allows for second shift people to enjoy it maybe after work. And I guess my question was, with the noise ordinance, what are the hours of silence that are sort of bound by the citywide noise ordinance? Is it anything after 10 or 11?
I don't know if there is, perhaps I'm not aware of any hours of silence. Ms. Jacobson is approaching the microphone and will enlighten us.
Yes, Sarah, that's a typical question that we get. Some cities have that, and some people expect that we have that, but to my knowledge, we've never had any hour restrictions in our ordinance, like garbage trucks can't be out before 6 a.m. or 7 p.m. making noise or something like that. We don't put hour restrictions in our ordinances or decibel restrictions. It just talks about unreasonably loud or unnecessary noise. And so Alder Neal is correct. If there are incidences in parks, those are separate violations that could be addressed through a citation for violating the noise ordinance or a disorderly conduct or whatever.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. So consensus is something to keep an eye on, and if we get, broader complaints around the community, we'd consider a change.
Sure.
Very good.
Works for me.
Thank you. I think it's good that we heard Ms. Griffith, her issue, and I think she knows her options. And I'm pretty sure she knows her alderman's phone number now, so it's all good. Okay, this kind of just a paperwork thing. Item 5, the updating of the name of the bridge known as Snake Bridge in Chapter 9 of the Municipal Code. I think we should change it and say something along the lines of the bridge over the Highway N Bridge, also known as McCleary Bridge, formerly known as Snake Bridge, because I think that would cover all of our waterfront. What are the thoughts of the committee members?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, wasn't Snake Bridge really, the old bridge that is now gone, which was also known as McCleary Bridge? And was this bridge ever officially named at all?
I believe that the new bridge is officially known as McCleary Bridge.
Okay.
Little
Well,
known fact.
if it is officially known as McCleary Bridge, then I don't see any reason for any action here at all unless we want to update it for some reason. Certainly don't want to call it Snake Bridge. I would offer up a suggestion for a new name if it needed a name of Russell Spike Berg, who was it's kind of like known as the father of downhill and cross-country skiing in the Wausau and Rib Mountain area. That bridge connects those two entities. He was instrumental in the creation of on Rib Mountain way back in like the 30s. World War II, he fought in the U.S. Army Mountain Division in northern Italy and was wounded there and came back here, and then for decades gave free skiing lessons to kids by the thousands. He was a pretty important personage that sort of bridged Rib Mountain and Wausau, actually. So if there is a need for a name, if McCleary is not the actual on-the-record name, I would throw that one up there for consideration. Otherwise, I'd say just leave it alone.
Well, the wording now says commonly known as Snake Bridge, and I believe that the official name, and Jamie can probably clue us in on that, but I believe the official name is McCleary Bridge, and that's not even mentioned in this language, so I think that should be fixed, and we want to change it to Spikeberg Bridge. That's another issue, but Ms. Polly?
I can verify while we're here, if it's named McCleary Bridge. I guess I don't know, and I didn't have that information. It does say commonly known as Snake Bridge, so the other suggestion is you could just keep it as what it says, under County Highway N Bridge, and then cross out the rest, and that would just, depending on, no matter what the name is, it is a county highway that does go through there.
That would take care of it.
But I can look it up.
We
real
could
quick.
forget the additional auxiliary names.
Yeah, and I don't know that we've got it's really our purview to rename the bridge or or whatnot, because it's not a park. I mean, this is just from verbiage in our park, in our regulations about fishing and diving and whatnot. So it would probably have to go through FISM or something like that if we were talking about a rename the bridge. So there you go. Is the bridge the city's property or is it county property? So I don't know. I think it's best just to say that, you know, the county, if this county was an bridge, would be best as a descriptor rather than a name.
So, Alder Neal, are you moving that we change the verbiage in the ordinance to say just under the county highway and bridge? Stop
Sure.
there, stop there?
Second.
That would take care of it. Second by Alder Killian. Any other suggestions on this weighty matter? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Nice, simple change, thank you very much.
So we cross out commonly noticed.
Yeah, so the wording would be under, I'll get it out. Under county highway and bridge,
Okay,
semicolon, boom. So we got that taken care of. Very good. And discussion and possible action on lighting for the River Life Bridge, and that turned out to be a much more complicated matter than I ever imagined. So Ms. Polly can bring everyone up to speed on that.
sure, thank you. And Mr. Frex is on as well. He deals with this more closely than I do, so he can maybe add to what I have. But when the River Life Park area was designed, and that was before I got here, actually. I kind of came in the middle of it. But it seems to be that there was discussion on the lighting of the bridge and the changing of that lighting with different events and different seasons. So Greg supplied me with what he had was an original spreadsheet he was given in 2018, which I included in your packet, as to when the lighting of the bridge should change into what colors. In the process of doing this over the last 2 years, we've come to realize that it's very difficult to change the bridge lighting because somebody has to physically go down to the bridge, electrical box or whatever, and take out the driver, bring it to CCIT. CCIT actually is the one that programs the lighting for us, and then someone has to take it back down there. So it's not just a computer program that we can get onto and change, which would make it so much easier. There's a physical part to it. So we wanted to bring this forward because we're getting more and more requests for changing that lighting for a week here, a day here, a month here, and you know, we have that original list, which I can bring up here. I'll show you. It's in your packet, but I did take out some, oops, where did it go? Here. I did suggest, when in talking with Greg on, you know, when we change this, if we could set it in the beginning of the year for the whole year, it's very easy for CCIT to do. One of the things, you know, if we wanted to include Packer game days and Badger football game days, we could, but we have to wait till that schedule comes out, and then we have to make those changes. The other part of it is, where do we stop? I mean, is it only football that we're going to support, or do we support basketball? Do we support hockey? I mean, we could have it changing every single day. The other side of it, these football games are typically played during the day when the bridge is not even lit. So unless it's like a big, huge championship game, we didn't see that's really necessary to change it to green and gold on a Sunday when it's not on until after the game's already been played in most cases. But we wanted to bring this forward, and I think we are looking for direction. We can develop a policy on the bridge lighting. Do you want us to keep it open to everybody and make those changes as best we can with CCIT, or can we, I mean, we are asking really if we could set this list and kind of keep it at this, or maybe tweak it here and there, for one thing or the other, but to have really kind of our policy on, this is when the lights on the bridge will change, and these are what the colors it will change to. I think what we're nervous about is that we get a request from one organization for the month of June, let's say. But then we get a request from another organization that has a special day on a specific day in June. It's then how do we make that distinction between who gets priority and who gets the bridge lighting? So I think if we kept it to traditional holidays or special events that the cities recognized, it would be much easier to program from CCIT's perspective. It would be fairly consistent, and we wouldn't have that conflict potentially. We have one request right now for the whole month of April for Child Abuse Prevention Month. So that's 1 month, but you know, April on here, we have Arbor Day, we have Easter. So I guess this is just really came to our attention as Greg's been working on fixing these lights down there and what there really takes to change these lights, that it's kind of bigger than we thought. And we'd like to have that discussion so that we have support as to what we're approving and what we're not approving, and that you don't see this coming back.
So first question would be, somebody has to go down there, park, walk over there, pull the driver, come to City Hall, drop it off, go away, come back later, drive down there, park, go over there, stick it in the box, and then go back and do the rest of their work for the day?
Greg, that's correct, right?
Yeah, so the way I think I heard you say that is, yes, there is a controller or a driver that needs to be pulled in order to have it programmed. Just for transparency, I believe that you can physically go change the lights to all blue, for example, but then to change it back to the program, you physically would have to go back down there. And that's the way we would want to do it, is to have it pre-programmed. But yeah, the short answer is yes. In order to get something programmed to turn it on and off, that's out of our wheelhouse in our department. It needs to be done through the IT department. So the driver needs to be physically pulled, programmed, and then reinstalled, and then it takes over.
Okay, and then I have a second question before I recognize our good mayor. We only got one of these drivers, so we can't call over here, tell them we want it red and green next week, and pick it up and go plug it in?
So the driver, if I'm even using that terminology correctly, and forgive me if I'm not, but the driver or the controller, yes, there is just one. It's a interchangeable electronic piece that comes out, gets programmed on a PC, and then it gets reinstalled. There's only one in that system.
It cost a lot of money. Can't we have two of them so we could streamline that?
Well, I don't think it would really matter if there were one or two. Either way, it would have to be, a human being would still have to go down and take it out. And we have a similar setup, just for your information, down at the 400 block, but we don't have this type of request for changing of the lights.
Okay. Mayor Katie.
Yeah, so I have been getting a bunch of questions on things like flags, like fly the certain flag during this time of year. So I've been investigating on my own kind of policies around that stuff, and this seems kind of similar. But one of the things that I really liked was out of Appleton, and they said that they tied, their flag, or it could be any of these, changing of the lights, to a proclamation by the city. So if you would proclaim it some such holiday, then you could change the lights and whatever, or you could tie it to a resolution if you wanted to, I suppose. Just throwing that out there for your information, if that helps.
Miss Mayor, do you ever get like proclamations where the same month is two different things though? So how would we
Yeah.
manage that?
So the way this probably doesn't solve the lights issue, but the way they solved it in Appleton was that it needs to be tied to a proclamation and you get your flag for one day, basically. So you would have to pick the day that you would want it to be. If it were an entire month, then, you know, you would have to, I don't know, they only do it for one day. So we could tie it to a whole month if that was what we wanted to do, but
Do you have a recommendation from staff as to how often it would make sense to change this lighting? Like twice a month or once a week or once a month or?
Well, honestly, with the list of the themes that we currently have, that are in the packet, we can program all of those in the beginning of the year and never have to change it again for the whole year. You know, it's kind of a program and leave it. So, I mean, that's
You
That's
can
the
tell
easiest
it
way
to
to do it?
start on May 1 with this and then start on June 1 with something else and you don't have to go down there and touch it?
right, correct.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way, but, you know, if something comes up, it can be changed. You know, in the process that Greg said, it could be changed. So, I mean, if we forget something on this list, or there's a new holiday created, or a new month, you know, created on here, then we could add it at any time.
So if this hadn't come up at this meeting, what would you be doing in 2021? How many of these changes would you have programmed in?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but I think we would have put all of these in except for the football games at this point, because the schedule's not out yet and we don't know.
So
what those
everything
are.
on this list is not crossed out?
Correct, just the games are.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Alder Neal, I believe.
Thank you. I've been raising my hand, but I can't find that little button on my iPad where you have the little digital hand raised. I used to be able to find that real easy. Now it's just kind of like disappeared. So I have to go like this. Couple things. It's great to have the capability to do things like this with that bridge. So I like that, but I'm not a big fan of just constantly doing something for every darn thing under the sun, particularly, you know, things related to like the Christian calendar, things along those lines. I don't think that's our business to be, you know, celebrating, you know, let's say Easter or Christmas per se, this way. But kind of back to Mayor Katie's idea about proclamations and whatnot. You know, I've seen this in other cities like Minneapolis, Milwaukee, where they have lighted bridges, where they do creative colored lighting to celebrate particular things like marginalized segments of the population. I would see where Juneteenth would be a good one, and it's not highlighted right now. You know, the various ethnic sections of our population, it would be nice to recognize them throughout the year. You know, other things that are secular, if that's the right word, in nature, that we can use as a celebratory, make it special to, you know, to light up that bridge, rather than just have it lighting, you know, changing all the darn time. It kind of takes the specialness out of it to me, if you just keep on doing it over and over again. So I could see it being done a more finite number of times throughout the year, for what, you know, is kind of deemed celebratory acknowledgements or holidays that, like I said, don't just adhere to the Christian calendar, or, you know, patriotic days or something like that. So I don't know. That's just me thinking out loud. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
I can't see anybody else has got their hand up, but one thought that comes to my mind is maybe we could be somewhat flexible on it, but still be responsive to community wishes by programming the thing quarterly. And if somebody came to the Parks office and said, you know, can I have it blue and green on this day? They can say, yes, there's time because, you know, we're not going to do the reprogramming for another 2 weeks or something, and it could be handled that way. And that way there'd be possibly no more than 4 trips down there a year. I don't know. Any thoughts on something like that?
Sure. Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I recall back when this was all a brand new thing, and then Alderman Nutting exclaimed rather forcefully that he thought it was really silly to have that bridge, you know, changing all these multicolored, you know, hues over and over again for no apparent reason. You kind of thought it was just sort of kitschy and not sophisticated, and I kind of agreed with him at the time because it just, seeing it happening, it just seemed a little out of place with a, which would be I think a more monotone kind of feel along all the other lighting along the stretch there, and then with the capability to do, the colored lighting, as I said earlier, save that for very distinct moments throughout the year that are really something to pay attention to from a celebratory standpoint, and probably something like tied to mayor proclamations.
Lou Larson has his hand up.
Pardon me?
Lou has his hand up.
Oh, Alder Larson, you're up? Okay. I see your hand, very good.
Okay, thank you. Alder Neal, the raise your hand is behind a little smiley face.
Oh, thank you.
Who would have thunk that when we put those up, of course, this was before I was alderman, that we'd create such a wonderful problem. I mean, it would be a whole lot different if it were just a flip of the button, at a computer, but with the labor intensive involved, I'm in full agreement. I think that we just ought to keep it to something real special, 4th of July, and as Mayor Katie said, the proclamations, that the mayor's proclamations, because otherwise, you could get everybody under the sun wanting this, and we have to come up with a solution and draw the line somewhere where we can't allow every Tom, Dick, and Harry to come down and say, this is what I want. I live in the city. So I'm in full agreement with what's been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Killian has his hand up.
Pardon?
Mr. Killian has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd really echo, I think, the comments that have been stated to this point, and it appears that there are different suggestions and options on the table, whether it's annual or quarterly, but as all committee members, I think, have indicated thus far, I think the reduction of frequency makes a lot of sense, and maybe while it was not stated explicitly yet, I think that staff time does equate to tax dollars, and sometimes money should not be an object when it comes to the most critical, pressing roles and priorities of government, but I do not think changing the colors on decorative lights on a bridge probably meets the threshold of critical government business. So I would agree with all the statements thus far, and however this becomes more efficient and less and requires less time and money from the city or other staff, I would support. Thank you.
Sounds good. I think, Ms. Polly, you got something?
Yeah, thank you for all the comments. I think what I'm hearing is that we want to set a list that maybe is even reduced further from what we had originally set of significant days, and then, still be somewhat open-minded to specific things. I think a lot of groups can come and have a proclamation read, and so I don't know if that necessarily solves our problem unless we do a restriction, like the mayor said, where it's just a day and they pick a day. But then we're still, could be frequently changing the lights. I guess what I think I'm hearing and what I think is a good starting point is if we could look at the list given, and I apologize, I should have given you a cleaner list. This looks really long with all of those struck out ones, but everything not struck out is currently what we would program. And so, for instance, like the LGBT Pride Month would be the month of June, which means it would be rainbow colors, but on these specific days in June, it would change to those different colors for that particular holiday that falls within that month. Same with October and September are months, but there's days within the months, September 3rd, September 11th, where it would change to that particular, red, white, and blue on those specific days. So I guess I would really like the committee, if possible, to look through this list, or maybe we can take it home and look through it, mark the ones you think are beneficial, send it back to me, and I can put a new list together for next month, or we could go through it. Typically, most of these holidays are federally recognized holidays. With the exception of the months that we've added that have been put on here, the rest of them are federally recognized holidays, so they don't go, we could add here, we could take away. There's some on here that, maybe Mother's Day, we wouldn't have on, and Father's Day, but May Day, some of those maybe could go away. But typically, most of these are some sort of a federal or large holiday. And, if there were specific months set aside, we could highlight those as well. I think that would maybe be what we're looking for as staff. Then we could program it once during the year. It could be done, and it would have to be programmed once a year. And then if there's ever an exception where we really wanted to change it, then we could make that exception.
I'm wondering how the committee would feel about asking staff to come back with a streamlined list, and it would be something, I think we do want to retain a little flexibility if something comes up in July that is happening in September or something like that. So maybe a list streamlined from this, maybe a third of the changes or something along those lines, and that the changing of the controller would be limited to about 4 times a year. That makes sense. Bring it back for our next meeting.
Mr. Larson has his hand up.
Alder Larson, you got your hand up?
Yes, sir, Madam Chair, or yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I think that's a pretty great idea. I think, streamline it if it needs streamlining. But most of all, we gotta remember that, like was discussed about the man hours and the money being spent, and we need to keep it simple yet effective. And I think what you came up with, Mr. Chair, is a great idea.
Thank you. I was wondering if we could put the city attorney on the spot again and get advice on the religious holiday thing and whether we should steer clear of that. That would be my inclination too, but
I think it would be my inclination too, just because while Christmas and Easter are very much commercialized as well, they are recognized Christian holidays, and we're not adding, Kwanzaa and Ramadan and everything else with colors there. So to be inclusive and diverse, I was curious, Jamie, when you said they were federally recognized holidays. If that's true and we hold that definition, then we could follow through with that definition and say anything that's a federally or a state recognized holiday we will consider. Otherwise, I think my recommendation too would be to avoid just Christian holidays.
okay. I think we've got some good guidance here. You feel good about it, you and Greg?
Yeah, we can work on this list. We have a good starting point, so we can work on the list, and I'll take out all the games, and that will take a huge part of this out, and then we'll look at those religious holidays. I'll look at the federally recognized holidays and bring that even back just for discussion, if that's maybe one of
Yeah.
the criteria, so I can have that ready, yeah.
And I do think that, the person on the
Do you need
street,
a motion, Mr. Chair?
I don't think so. I think we're just
Okay.
kind of shoving it down the road a little bit. I'm comfortable with it. Does anybody have any objection to doing that? I think we're all right. Make a decision next time, hopefully. But I do think most citizens would be surprised if they found out that that much city employee time is involved in running that controller back and forth, so I think this is a good decision. Thank you for that. Item number 7, might take us a little while. Discussion regarding the establishment of a naming rights and sponsorship policy for the city of Wausau parks and park facilities.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is for discussion tonight because I highly expect to bring this back, maybe even multiple meetings in a row to kind of discuss to get to where we want it to be. But as I wrote in the summary, it's come to my attention, it started in the city in my last 3 years with the dog park and requests to name the dog park, and we didn't necessarily have a park naming policy. We also have, talked about, even in our office, of ways to generate more revenue, selling sponsorship on a field or sponsorship of a pool or sponsorship. You could really sell sponsorship on anything. And then on the county side, because we work in both worlds, all we had was kind of a sponsorship plan for the sports complex. But when it came to my attention that the county, which I included in here as well, I gotta find it. The county has a naming policy and criteria and sponsorship, but it specifically says in here that parks, recreation, and forestry facilities are exempt. So that wasn't really helping me at all. So I'm taking this both to you today and to our Parks Commission tomorrow for discussion, because as we move forward with our department, I really, and I've talked to Ms. Jacobson as well, and the city doesn't have a current naming policy either, that I think it is in our best interest to put a policy together to really be able to, have that discussion if someone wants to name a park or a bridge, as Mr. Neal said earlier, or sponsor a facility and what that kind of looks like and what criteria. I don't think it's good that we just put anybody's name on our facilities. I think they should meet certain criteria that the council can vet and make sure that it's a really good choice for the city and affiliation, as well as our facilities. And so to start the discussion, I included the county's policy that I did find that, like I said, exempts park facilities, but I think could very well include park facilities in their definitions. And then I also included, in my previous position in Minnesota, we did develop this park naming policy because we were developing, that city I worked in, we were developing like crazy and built 7 parks at one time, brand new with new subdivisions, and nobody knew what to call the parks. So we had to come up with a naming policy on how we were going to name them. And I did, during that time, I had done a lot of research through national park policies, through all different organizations around the nation, as well as the state of Minnesota. And this is kind of the policy that we had come up with. It's not, by any means the end-all be-all, but I wanted to start the discussion because there's 2 different discussions here. There's a naming policy and then there's a sponsorship policy. The naming policy would be something that you name that sticks long-term on a facility. And sponsorship could be a short-term, 5, 10-year, 20-year agreement that we would put together for that particular facility. But I still think there needs to be some criteria. So, like, for the one that we put together in Minnesota, we had a purpose of our naming. We wanted the names to be unique, meaningful, inclusive, so we weren't doing anything that would look bad upon the city. And this is a draft policy. All I did was change the city where I worked to the city of Wausau. So by no means is this, that. And then there's the application process, because I think there's even an application process on the county side, because I think those things are substantial, that it's not something that I feel comfortable as staff naming a facility without the elected officials' feedback. When it comes to sponsorship, if we have guidelines for sponsorship, and we've been given the ability to get sponsors for facilities, that's something I feel more comfortable with going forward if I have guidelines to follow. So like when we sell sponsorship for the sports complex in the county, East Bay had the naming rights. It was a 5-year agreement. There was stipulation there. We are currently negotiating a 10-year agreement with a new sponsor, but I have guidelines for there, and we have a goal of a certain percentage that the sponsorship needs to be of the operating cost. So the two different discussions here is the naming policy, which I think is the main one, and then we'll get to the sponsorship policy. But where I really wanted to talk about with the naming policy is kind of the guidelines for naming. This is what we need to have a discussion on is, we don't want any names to be duplicate names. So we don't want another Riverside Park in town. We don't want, River Life and Riverside are even close together, but we don't want to duplicate. We want to kind of make it fit within whatever neighborhood it's in. So with a new development, we sometimes named it after the street it was on, or the development, what it was called when it went in. So that's a more simple one, but if we name it of historic places, events, cultural ideas, we want to really vet those and make sure that they are, significant to this area, had something to do with shaping the city of Wausau and Marathon County, something like that. The next one is easy, if you name it after wildlife or natural areas, that's pretty non-controversial most of the time. But then you get down to if you want to name it after a person. And that's kind of where, when I did my research on the naming rights, when I made this policy, was everybody does it a little bit different. And some people had said that some communities wouldn't name anything after anybody that was living. They had to be deceased in order to name it after them. So that's an option. The county's policy, in the county's policy, if it's an employee, they have to be separated from service for so long, or at least 1 year. Some of this is from the county policy too. They have to, you could make it that they have to have been a resident of the city, or in the area and did significant contributions to the city. They are in good standings, so they're not, convicted of a felony and in prison, and, associating that name with the city would not be good. So there's criteria there. And then sometimes when we get money for building a facility, at what point does it constitute naming rights? And I think that's where we're kind of, with the naming of the dog park, we did accept a naming contribution for a certain amount, but it is a very minuscule amount compared to I shouldn't say minuscule, it's a great amount, but it's smaller in compared to the whole park project. And now we have somebody who's given a little bit more than what we required of the naming rights donor. So this is a suggestion that quite a few had, was that if they donated at least 51% of the value of the park, whatever that is, improvements or land, then, if someone donated all their land and that was where the park was going to go, that's probably a good reason to name that park after that person. And I know we have a few of those here in the city as well. I don't know what the criteria was when Brockmeyer Park got named after Mr. Brockmeyer. I know he contributed to the community quite a bit and was a teacher and a coach and stuff like that, you know, but we didn't have criteria then. So it would be nice to have this criteria moving forward, and I wanted to get the discussion started.
On the whole, I think this good stuff. Are there any, we can get into some nitty-gritty, are there any broad reactions to what we're hearing and seeing here? I did on the first page, not seeing any hands. On the first page, where it's under the application process, the last one of, under letter B, where the application process should include a description of the process involved in choosing the proposed name and what type of public involvement was used. And there really, at that point, I wouldn't think there would have been any public involvement because the application hadn't been considered by the city. So I think that the letter V, I think, could be just go away or be modified, just say the description involved in the process and choosing the proposed name. Stop there.
So to clarify that, the reason why that's on this one is because of, like I said, of those new, the new developments that were coming in where the park didn't have a name. So sometimes there was like a Girl Scout troop that all got together and they put in naming suggestions and then they submitted one to the city. Or there was a neighborhood organization that got together. So that could be stricken from here. But that's why that was in there from my previous.
Okay, I guess not hurting anything. If there was public involvement, they could cite it. Under letter 3, the last paragraph on the page, it says, if it is decided that the park name does not appear to meet the intent and guidelines, that the governing body would receive a memo that the name is not being recommended. I think we could ditch that because if it's not being recommended, it just wouldn't be recommended. It wouldn't happen. I mean, they're not expecting anything, so. And let's see what else we got. Not much. Overall, I think it really covered the waterfront nicely. There was some inconsistency in the material. Some of it was requiring a financial contribution of 51%. At one point it said 50, so we just need to make sure those are all right. And then in the on page 13 of our packet, where it's park name guidelines, there's reference to cultural references to using the Dakota language. And we probably want to change that to generic Native American language or concepts, or.
Yep, sorry, I took that out in the other area.
You got almost all of it.
I did have almost all of it. We had a community that was the Manitwakiton Sioux community that was a huge part of our community there, and that was their language, and so a lot of the names of our parks were submitted with that. So yes, that doesn't pertain to Wausau at this point.
Okay.
And I don't even think it needs to be in as far as any language in the naming rights. We had a specific community that was
It's a good reminder that, you don't just take somebody's language and use it
right.
any old way you want. So I think that's fine. Any hands up yet? Any thoughts on this?
I haven't seen any.
Okay,
I'll raise my hand.
very good. Alder Neal,
There it is. I'm gonna raise it digitally. Oh,
you have a history of naming things, so we want to hear from you.
yeah,
You're
I've
a,
named a lot of things.
you're a namer.
This subject, I'm sorry, Jamie, but it's kind of giving me a headache to think about it. It's just, there's so much in it, so much to think about, and to try and formalize it could be a pretty monumental task to really get it to where it's, just watertight. I wonder if that's the best way to go, or to take an easier sort of laissez-faire approach and deal with these as they might arise on their own merits. Because like like you say, one donor might give the land, and how much is that land worth versus the cost of building the whole facility? So is it just giving the land enough? Or is 51%, a magic number? Or is 37% a magic number or whatever? I think it can get a little touchy in terms of naming something. We need to take into account that perhaps the neighborhood, the history, features there, a variety of things, people's interests. I kind of like sponsorship opportunities. It's an easier thing to think about because you can easily have, Riverside Park, sponsored by, 3M Corporation. And then that could be up there for 10 years, 5 years, 12 years, or forever, depending on how much, we just kind of lay that out in terms of how many years you can have a sponsorship acknowledgement. But names are kind of forever, and I kind of like to just consider, this is not necessarily what I'm saying we should do, but I'd like us to consider a bit more of a informal approach to naming and deal with each one on their own merits. There's not going to be that many of them, for one thing. Most of our properties are already named. We're not going to throw them out there to be renamed necessarily. So we're talking mostly about new facilities, of which they come along kind of once in a dog's age. So otherwise, this can really get detailed to death, I'm afraid, and it could drive the committee crazy. It could drive Director Polly crazy, and we maybe never get it right. So I'm going to stop talking.
I think that's something to think about. One of the things we could do is not have all of the rules, but as Alder Neal said, maybe kind of distill the guidelines from this document, and if a naming opportunity comes up, we could haul this out and say, okay, here are the guidelines that we want to use to evaluate this, and go from there. Other thoughts from the committee?
Mr. Killian.
Mr. Killian.
Thank you. I would second some of Alder Neal's points on this, and I think kind of there may be situations where things need to be tailored to the particular geography, the time, the manner in which things may be occurring, and I think the commentary about land value and so forth was also pretty astute. I would worry not so much on sponsorships, because on the sponsorship level, I mean, it's almost inherently kind of a pay-for-play scenario, and it's meant to be. But on naming rights, aside from sponsorships, any type of pay-for-play scenario would be a concern for me. And there may be other things, such as in the draft application that we've got here. I believe it's on page 13. E, a local historical individual or family who were influential in the development of the city or of other widely acknowledged historic importance. I think we may find ourselves with a rather limited set if we rely on just kind of mainstream histories we often find locally, or mythologies, however you want to term it. I think we run the risk of leaving out many people, or as this states, families, what have you, workers that may have significantly contributed to the development of the city, but may not really be recognized well in the mainstream narrative. So yes, I think there's some value in approaching it in a manner that Alder Neal has described, and if we do not, then there would be some specific points like E and F in that application that if this were to proceed further, I would want to move to strike those or amend them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson has his hand up, but I'll let him speak and then I have some
Alder Larson.
comments.
I guess I'm just gonna echo the thoughts of my colleagues once again. You know, I guess we really do need some kind of guidelines set down for this, but then again, we need to keep it simple. I certainly would hate to see we're not a Milwaukee where we have a ballpark that, they fight over the naming rights and big money involved. I certainly, if something comes up, I would like to see it, if businesses wanna locally sponsor something that would be great, but, there again, it's just, I agree with what Alder Killian and what Alder Neal said, let's just keep it simple. Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Polly?
Okay, well, I just want to comment on some of the comments that were made. So, first of all, I think this is necessary to be inclusive of anybody in the community and to have some guidelines that everybody follows. I think this may not happen very often. It may not. And if it never happens, great, we never have to use it. But if it does happen and you're caught in a situation as an elected body to have to make a decision of whether or not to name a park after somebody, and you don't have guidelines to follow, you could maybe make a decision because you just don't like the family. Like, you think they got enough and they have too much money, they don't need the name. I don't know. I think that having some sort of guidelines is necessary to keep it fair for everybody. They don't have to be real specific guidelines. I mean, we can simplify these even down. The counties that are included, the counties, because the counties has, some names to avoid. They've got some more information. It doesn't need to be that inclusive. It could be much more general. But I think you need to have some criteria to follow, or you're going to be in a situation to really try to explain why you chose one name over another, if that comes to be. And then I just wanted to point out to Alder Killian's, your comment about the historical individuals. The way I read that, it could be, that family could be any family that's been influential in the development of the city. So to me, it doesn't say anywhere in there that they are a family known to the community. It could be my family. I mean, my grandpa, owned my great-grandpa owned much of the land that Wausau West is on. Most people probably don't know who he is, but he was influential in helping to develop that whole west side of the city. But to me, he was a farmer, and that's, so you could have anybody, that's why there's an application, because anybody can apply. Anybody can apply for any name anywhere for any reason, but if you don't have any criteria to follow, it's hard to accept or deny that application, but there is always that option to accept or deny that application. But at least you have a policy to follow that puts it out there that says, hey, we'll consider anything that you want to put forward, but here's at least the basis of the criteria we're going to base it on. If you take it on a case-by-case basis, I am afraid that it's going to look at sometimes to be biased, depending upon who the council members are, depending upon who the applicant is. So those are my comments, and Mr. Killian has his hand up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Polly, for the additional information. I think based on what you said in the spirit of inclusiveness, then, I don't know if we're just discussing this today or if we may take action on it, but then I think then the second portion of E, where it says, or of other widely acknowledged historic importance, in the type of scenario you described, perhaps just losing that that portion of E may reduce some confusion there. And then if we would take action on this either today or in the future, then also I think that F, the financial contribution, as Alder Neal mentioned, I mean, even in terms of contribution of land and what the value may be, and I think additionally, just any type of pay-for-play mechanism, that would still be a lingering concern for me if we were to kind of use parameters and guidelines in the process. Thank you.
Mr. Killian, could you tell us, I'm not sure where you are in the document,
He's on the application. I've been following.
Yes.
in the application?
My apologies. Yes, page 13 of the PDF, I believe. Yep, there it is on the screen.
Okay.
E and F.
The one thing I do want to point out is this, and maybe we make this bold in here, is that even if somebody would put in an application and meet all of the guidelines, it doesn't mean that their name would be approved. I think that is critical to have somewhere in a document too, if we're going to put this forward. I'm not asking for you, I put it on the meeting agenda tonight just for discussion. I didn't put action on because I think we need to have the discussion, and I need to hear from you all what your thoughts are and some ideas, exactly what Mr. Killian is saying, some of the suggestions for changes or clarification, and then depending upon, this policy and the county's policy, is there one thing you liked in one policy that you didn't like in the other? And, then I can piecemeal that and come back to you with something different.
So what you'd like to do is take some of the comments that were made here today, fine tune it a little bit. Maybe, I think it might be, there could be an influence on what the park commission, how that body receives this too.
Yep, because they'll talk about it tomorrow.
So if there's no objection from the committee, we can have that happen and wait to see what the park commission says. I see Alder Watson, I was going to call on you. I see you have your hand up.
Hi, I just wondered, is there any kind of petition component, like having so many people like sign on to accepting that name?
I didn't see any in there.
There
Probably-
isn't particularly in here, but that was one of the, so in my previous experience when we were naming new parks, that was what Mr. Peckham kind of said in the application part of it, where we were, where was it? Where we asked what kind of process they had gone through in order to come up with this name. I forget where it is now, but that's one of the things in the application process it was. The description of the process involved in choosing the name, so that was something we like to see on the application to kind of know where the name was coming from and how much support it was getting. And then it was usually discussed too at a public meeting, so people could come in and do public comment on it as well.
Because maybe that would be a cool addition to the process, is just having so many, citizens agree and sign the petition.
I see she's taking notes over here, so.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments?
Yes,
Alder Neal.
yeah, just real quickly, when we talk about, let's say, the new Wausau Dog Park, which is, I don't know, maybe still nameless.
No, it's got a name.
The thing is, this was a park that was in large part financed by, grassroots efforts and foundation donations and that sort of thing. And to what degree should people that are really spearheading a project like that, rather than the city, because the city definitely was involved and definitely gave money towards it, but the majority of it came from grassroots efforts. To what degree do organizers like that have to sort of negotiate the naming rights to something that they're trying to get done? Or do they have to just follow city rules?
Well, I think that's part of the discussion, and that maybe ties into this and or to the sponsorship part, for the way I see the dog park. Well, the subcommittee makes a recommendation to the Parks Committee, which they did, and then it was talked about. I think it doesn't mean that the person, if they're giving money, I mean, that person the application still could have gone through this process and they would have filled it out as to, what her tie was to that park and to her contributions to the city, and then you'd make that change. So the park committee can still make those determinations. It doesn't say that they have to give 51% or that they have to do this. But I think that if those subcommittees don't have any guidelines, it doesn't help them either, because when we got those requests for that name, we were kind of all deer in headlights of, okay, we'll take this and we'll discuss it and we'll determine whether or not it's something we agree with. And it would have been helpful if we had a little bit of criteria, at least maybe, what kind of civic service that person had or how they were, he gave some of that information, but it probably would have been nice to have some of that criteria. I think also when it comes to the sponsorship, which is maybe I bring that back as a separate discussion. I kind of threw it in here just maybe to get you thinking about it. But I think that sponsorship is something we need to set some guidelines to is, if we're doing it to raise money, does that mean that maybe it's a certain number of year term that we are allowing instead of a perpetual name? And if it's a perpetual name, then it needs to meet a different criteria. The other thing to consider, and we're seeing this on the county side, is it needs to be worthwhile, because like with the sports complex, it had one sponsor for only 5 years. It's very well known with that name, and there's signage everywhere with that name, and now we're trying to work with a new sponsor, and we are going to get everybody to find or to recognize that sports complex with the new sponsor's name, and sooner or later the old sponsor will not be, part of that recognition. But for us as a department and as the city or county in general, there's signage that goes into those sponsorships. There's the recognition by the community and trying to reprogram people to think differently. So when it comes to sponsorships and the names of facilities of sponsors, that's where I think we need to take more into consideration is how long are we doing it for? Why are we doing it? What's the significance? So we can justify that 5 years from now, we're going to spend $5,000 extra dollars to change out signage, or stuff like that.
I would like to think that the process in the future would work something like what we've seen with the dog park, and that we had a subcommittee that was really tuned in to what was going on in terms of how this was unfolding, and that subcommittee's recommendation was heeded by this committee. So I would hope that would happen in future instances as well. Any other comments on this one? Very good. And going into educational items, including the storied boy with the boot issue. Ms. Polly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair Peckham. I wanted to bring this forward because it's been the topic of a few other committees lately, and I didn't want you to be left out. So the boy with the boot statue is a city statue that is currently in the Wausau Center Mall as you walk into the food court. It's similar to this one here on the right, or my right, I guess. I don't know if it's your right or not, but it's the one with upside down boot. So when the mall is going to be taken down, I've been talking with Godorsey Construction, and they will take it out for us, and they're going to return it back to the city for safekeeping. This boy with the boot statue originally was given by the Hammond family and put in Hammond Park in the 1920s. And then it was removed because it was vandalized too many times, and it was replaced with another sculpture, which I put that picture in here as well, called Willie's Dilemma, which is this little guy here. That also has since been removed and is in our park storage building. But getting back to the boy with the boot statue, it's one of 25 in the world. And sorry, the pictures didn't come out too, but I put in a little bit of history on it. it's a neat little statue, and it's gotten some attention by the Downtown River District. They've reached out to me and asked if they could help find a new home for it once the mall comes down. So that'll be a decision that will come here to the city council. Depending upon where it goes, it'll either come to you as the park commission, or it will go to the planning commission. If it's a public sculpture, it'll probably go through planning. But I wanted to at least, because it originated in a park, give you that heads up that we will be getting it back, and the city will be able to choose where it will go. The Downtown River District and the Historical Society are looking at it and hoping to maybe put it into some of the new development that will go in where the mall is going, or maybe an indoor facility because it's been out of the elements for so long. It is it's not a drinking fountain, it is a water fountain. More to come on it, but we are going to get it back out of the mall, and we probably will be working with different groups on figuring out where it might go. Just want to give you that information.
Very good. I would like to think, as I read this, I thought, well, we are a fine enough community these days that we could put it out and it wouldn't be vandalized, but then I thought about it a little more, and I think it's too tempting. So, any comments or questions on that one? Very good. Other park update.
All right, under the park update, the biggest thing we have is the city had done an ADA study, and our department is now getting to going through that study and updating some of the smaller corrections that need to be done, such as, small plumbing fixtures such as grab bar locations, tree obstructions, picnic tables, etc. Then we are also, Greg and his staff are working on prioritizing the high, I think they're in different categories on severity, and then we'll be working on those and working some of those maybe into some small project funds and some of those into some CIP projects down the road. But wanted to just give you an update that we are currently working on that. Then the rest of what we're doing right now is a lot of regular routine maintenance. With this warmer weather, our snow and our ice are going away faster than we were able to make it, but we finally had it made. Sylvan Hill closes this weekend, is the last weekend. Hopefully we have some snow left to keep it open this weekend. We're doing a lot of tree removal still, snow removal when it snows, and then starting to gear up for spring and summer. So, I don't know, Greg, do you have anything more to add?
No, I think you covered everything. It's just a concept of the weather going forward, so things are going to change fast.
I was rather astounded by the 52 days of snowmaking for Sylvan Hill. Is that a new world record, Greg, or?
Well, it's not a record that we're real proud of. It's just something we inherited because of our system. We only have one gun, and just to refresh your memories, next year that will be a different scenario for us because we will have a complete new snowmaking system at the Sylvan Recreation Area. So we're looking forward to that. But yeah, it was a very long process, and the good thing is it's been a mild winter.
I suppose once you get 4 or 5 weeks into it, you can't quit, right?
Well, as servants of the community, I think you know what we're dealing with there. So yeah, we're providing a service and doing the best that we can.
Got to come through. Alder Larson, I saw your lips moving. Were you wanting to speak? No? Okay.
Good.
Thank
My
you.
wife is hollering at me in the other room.
Okay. Tell her you want more coffee. Okay. Ms. Polly can continue.
Okay, and then the dog park special committee, we have a meeting here at 6. So there wasn't a quorum present in February, but the members still did discuss open house events. They were hoping to have open house events the first weekend in February. Then they postponed it to the second weekend in February, and both of those weekends were negative temperatures, so the open house at the dog park did not happen. They are hoping for this Saturday However, if this warm-up keeps going, we won't have any snow left on the dog park by Saturday, so it's something that we do have to discuss here at 6 o'clock. And then tonight they're gonna talk about, two, we've got the final budget, we're gonna get an update from our, gentleman who has the naming rights with some signage, and, talk about, getting it complete, so the shelter, that, there's still budget left, we still have money that we could get a shelter put in, agility equipment, maybe irrigation, depending upon the amount that's left, so that's what they're continuing to still work on.
Very good. Anything else? Hearing none, there is some of the future agenda items. I don't know if by next time we're going to have any recommendations on contamination cleanup in Riverside Park, but we'll see on that. But we do have some of the agenda items we already know we're going to be coming back to. Anybody have anything right now that they want added? Can always chime in later. Very good. We're looking at the next meeting date of Monday, April 5 at 4:30. All of the members of the committee will be advised if there's going to be an event on Saturday morning at the dog park. You might want to come down and check it out. But otherwise, is there a motion to adjourn out there? Alder Killian moved. Alder Larson second. All those in favor of adjournment, wave
Aye.
goodbye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, thank you.